Dateline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
So like what happened, I was really young, and I remember having like this very vivid dream, nightmare, whatever it was. Mm-hmm. And I remember I went up like in the dream, I remember going upstairs and like turning, and like I see like a large window, and then I see like this bedroom, and I see like a bed laying down, and I see like this praying mantis like facing me on like the back wall behind the bed, like looking at me, like facing through the wall and just looking at me. And like the next thing I know, in the dream, I'm like laying down on the bed, and like I can't move, and I'm looking straight up at this praying mantis, just looking down at me.
Okay.
And that's all I knew from that dream.
Now,
like,
when you say a praying mantis,
that's what it looked like.
How big was it, and did it have the structure, like the body type of a praying mantis, or was it just more the head, or was it everything? Or
from the dream that I had, I remember it looked like a praying mantis. I only saw like the torso coming out of the wall, like looking down at me. All I saw was like what would be its like chest and like its head and like its arms like looking down at me. I mean, it literally it looked like a praying mantis would look like. It just looked like a mantis.
Yeah.
And so that dream stuck with me for years, and I had always applied it to this really weird house that was right down the street. And for like the longest time, I always thought like this house would never change. It still looks the same to this day as it did all those years ago.
Yeah.
And I've never met the person who's lived there. I've never been inside, and yet like I always knew like the large window that they have out front, behind that was where the bedroom took place. But like I've never been inside. So I don't know, it was very weird. And so I questioned it through all those like 15 years. And then until I got into like the whole phenomenon and like going down the rabbit hole, I started making connections. And then that's where I started questioning it. And then that's where I found the hypnotherapist, and here we are.
Okay, perfect. So let's talk about that. So this rabbit hole that you went down, what kind of things were reflected from that rabbit hole? Like, what have you learned, and what did you discover?
Oh, yeah, I mean, you learn just like UFOs, like all these abduction stories, all these like the tall whites, like the Nordics, the little grays, the praying mantis, like lavender skinned beings, and like all these different kinds of UFOs. Just over the years, just seeing all those different stories and like hearing similarities and all these other stories, and like kind of seeing my own similarities within those, and that's where I started making connections.
Yeah, and so the connection that you really kind of resonated with then was the praying mantis.
It was the praying mantis, yes.
Yeah. And that has been talked about many, many times, people coming across that. And it's not just recently. Yeah, I think I want to make that clear, is the praying mantis is something that has been talked about really since the 50s. I mean, I remember some old stories where that's how the witnesses described it, was as like a praying mantis. Now, it didn't become popular in our culture until like the 80s, because the grays, the big eyes, that kind of a thing really started to take hold. But I think for us, and which is really interesting, in this dream, did you consider it a nightmare? I mean, were you terrified of this creature?
No.
So you didn't consider this as a scary thing. You just saw it and knew what it was, right? Essentially.
No. In the dream, yes.
Mm-hmm. And so when you woke up from the dream, and how old did you say that you were?
Oh, I was young, but like remembering now, I was 6 years old.
6, yeah. That's a good time frame. I mean, I know a lot of people, when abductions start, they always talk about being 4, 5, and 6, and really starting to have those kind of memories that pop in, because we don't remember really kind of before that. Our memory changes, or not remember, I shouldn't say that. I should say that our brain waves change at 4, between 4 and 5. That frequency
when the long-term
changes.
memory in the brain starts.
Exactly. And so when that happens, then, if something was occurring and happening to you, then your brain at that point is going to try to make sense of it all. And I think that's what's important that we talk about and open up to in these abduction cases, is that there is something happening. We can't fully explain everything that's happening. And a lot of it comes out through hypnosis because it's, for some reason, it's buried deep within like a subconscious realm, if that makes sense.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So in your story and your experience, when you started going down this rabbit hole, you mentioned that you reached out to like a hypnotherapist then? And did you get hypnotherapy done?
Yeah, so what had happened, I was browsing through Reddit and like I'm going through all like the alien related subreddits, and I see someone's post about offering free like pro bono hypnotherapy sessions for people who think they've been abducted. And I was like, hell, that's me.
Yeah.
So I reached out to him and told him my story and like shared some of my experiences with him, and then he said we scheduled a time and we did the hypnotherapy session.
Okay. How did that go? Can you talk about that at all?
Yeah. So his methodology is quite amazing. Like he does like he does some like Reiki work with like his like hypnotion or hypnotion, whatever you call it.
The hypnotherapy portion of it?
That.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
And he kind of like got me into like this like almost like meditative state, and he walked me through like a visualized like path kind of, and he took me to a lake, and he made me visualize my memory of this like of this dream at the bottom of this lake. And so during the hypnosis, I went down and I swam to the bottom of this lake, and then I went through this portal at the bottom of the lake, and I went into my memory.
Okay.
And at that point, I saw myself being guided or like escorted down like this long stretch, like dark metallic hallway. It felt very cold. It was very like dark, and I don't even know, it's like not like industrial, but like best word I can describe it, but very sterile, I guess.
Okay.
Like there wasn't like tools or like bolts. Everything was very flush. It was very well put together, but I don't know. It's hard to describe. But anyways, it was very cold and it was very dark. And I remember seeing these pipes that ran the length of the hallways, like these large pipes. And they ran all the way down. And I remember looking to the right, and I see this large window, and I'm walking up to this window, and I see like this black. And I remember seeing like I'm sure it was Earth. I don't think I was taken to some other planet, but I remember seeing the Earth or some planet beneath me to the left. And it was blue, so I'm assuming it was Earth.
Okay.
And I remember walking down this hallway more, and I'm seeing at the end of the hallway these people like walking down and like back and forth like into this adjacent hallway, and I'm seeing like these large crates on the floor. There's people bending down, standing up by them. They look like they're busy, like they're doing something. And I'm approaching them, and then the one that's like crouched down looks up at me, and like they're shocked, scared, angry, like they're like, "Hey, you're not supposed to be here." Right. Like, and that kind of like made me like jump back, and like I this whole time I'm like even now I'm like shaking talking about it.
Yeah.
And this whole time like I know I'm hyperventilating. I can feel my body just like breathing. I am scared.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I remember being escorted back by these two smaller beings about my height. In the memory, I'm like 6 years old. I'm a small kid. Mm-hmm. So these things are my height. And I remember, I think they had me. I don't remember walking. I think they may have either picked me up or had me levitated, but I was not touching the ground at this point.
Okay.
And I remember being guided back to this large room. I remember seeing a large square doorway. There were no doors. It was just an open walkway, like a frame. Mm-hmm. And inside was this praying mantis, and it was like going about its business. Like I remember seeing there was a bed like to the left, and it had like some overhead lights, and there was like a large like science station looking thing, and there were like a bunch of like tools, screens, like whatever, I don't know, a bunch of stuff, and it was just going about its business, like organizing things. And I remember seeing these two smaller beings right next to it, and that's what caught me off guard. Like they worked in pairs, the little ones. They worked in pairs, and I remember being led into the room, and then they look at me, and like this whole time, the hypnotherapist is like having me like ask questions about like what's happening, who are these people. And I remember he like explained like during this process, it's like time is not linear, so you're able to go back and like visit and like communicate, and that's what I did. And I don't know if that's my own memory or if like there's something like higher on going on here, but I was able to communicate. They were able to like communicate through me, and I found out that the little ones that they regard themselves as tools, like servants, like that they know it's their job. Okay. And they said that we know them as many names, but like to them they're just there. They're servants. They're tools. They're just meant like that's their job. And I remember the hypnotherapist had me ask like why me? Why was I abducted? And that's when the Mantis looked at me and it said that it's all part of the plan. And as far as what that means, I have no clue. Yeah. I have no idea. And I remember he had me ask, like, where are you from? And the Mantis started showing me, like, a landscape of, like, this very, like, tropical planet. And it looked very, like, it had a perpetual sunset. Like, the sky was just, like, rosy pink. And, like, there were, like, these building-sized trees that looked like giant ferns, like, giant, like, palm trees. But, like, they didn't look like palm trees, but they did. They, like, very tropical-looking thing. Mm-hmm. And when the hypnotherapist had me ask, like, what is this planet called, it started relaying, like, this message of, like, we don't have a word for it, like, the name of their planet, but, like, I kept getting the sense of, like, the number 3. Like, okay. Like I kept wanting to say, like, tri or triple or, like, trinity or, like, it's something about the number 3 was okay. How they named their planet.
When this was breaking through to you and you started to realize that this was happening in this session, I mean, you're starting now. I get it. You're under hypnosis. When you came out of hypnosis, were you like blown away by it? Did it start to feel like it was a memory for you?
Yeah, everything, like the whole window, the whole room, going up the stairs, everything, everything like clicked.
Yeah. And in that, did you start to see like a change in yourself as well from it?
I would say so. Yeah. I'm kind of like having a trouble like gripping on reality. Kind of like it's definitely changed my worldview.
Now you talked about a little bit about being an atheist. Is that okay to bring up then? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you talked a little bit about being an atheist, and then you said that as you know, you're going through this process, did that change you? So did this open up a new light to meditation and to...
So I'm very spiritual.
Okay.
I'll start by saying that. Okay. I grew up Christian. I started to lose my faith in that. That's when I started to become like more scientific driven, started to become more atheist, looking at more materialistic things. Like I needed proof, you know what I mean? Yeah. But then I started like getting late night YouTube videos and like looking at ghost videos, and, like demonology and occult, like mysterious stuff, you know, like your top 10 videos and like all that mysterious stuff. And that started getting me like interested in like more of the occult stuff. And then that's when I started learning about like astral projection, lucid dreaming, meditation, like all that stuff. And that kind of got me interested in more like the hidden meanings behind all like the occult stuff and like what happens around the world, like all these religions and spirituality and stuff. And then that's when I started kind of doing like practicing stuff. And that's when I started having my mind open a little bit more. And then that's when I started having more experiences.
Have you been able to astral project yourself?
I have very, very bad luck with astral projection.
Okay.
I have tried for years. I've had some successful attempts, but nothing. I'm in no way like a professional.
Anything with like lucid dreaming or anything like that?
Same thing.
Okay. Since your hypnosis, then your hypnotherapy session, have you had any kind of dreams or anything that would add on to or be in addition to the one dream that you had.
And the hypnotherapist has had me like reach out to him if I've experienced anything like that, and no, I've like normal dreams, nothing out of the ordinary. I mean, I've had lots of synchronicities lately, a lot of numerology stuff.
What kind of synchronicities?
I actually see just the other day, like I saw like a trailer pass by on the highway that literally just said Mantis, and it had like a silhouette of a praying mantis.
Really?
Like out of all things.
Oh, that's interesting. That's very interesting.
Like, out of all things that passes by right in front of me at the stoplight. Yeah. And then like just like 333, 444, just like numerology, synchronicities, stuff like that.
Well, you just mentioned the number 3 was their planet. Something with the number 3. Like you said, like Trinity or something to that effect.
Something like that.
Yeah. So that's really interesting that you would see even the number 3 then come up. And I've talked about synchronicities before. Synchronicities to me are so fascinating. I firmly believe that whatever you want to call this reality that we live in, to me it's not the true reality. There's something else that's happening here with all of us. There's times that I've been on my own rabbit hole journey, and I don't believe that even the majority of people are true people. I mean, I've gone down this whole glitch in the Matrix theory where some of these people are just they're just background characters. They're non-player characters is what people call them, NPCs, and that's based off of, in case people don't know, it's based off of games that you play where you are the main character and you interact with other main characters, but in the background, whatever's moving, walking, or doing, those are non-player characters. So they have certain functions, but they're just more robotic than anything. Yeah. They're computer programs, essentially. There's been some interesting theories on that I got to say that it really warps my mind a little bit, and I think it would for a lot of people, because we don't know what we're living in. I mean, we listen to science and we listen to religion. Those are the two main things that are telling us what we live in right now. So when religion tells us one thing, science says the other, and they just keep clashing against each other. Yeah. The people who are left don't get a straight answer. My mind was more open to this paranormal side. How does all of this fit in?
Right.
And I think that that's where a lot of people like yourself are at. So you and I are pretty much at that same point. It's kind of like, if I had this, where does it fit in to me, to my journey, and how that works. I'm glad you went to see a hypnotherapist. I
am too. It definitely brought some answers, but now I have a lot more questions. Yeah. We actually have another session scheduled here in about another month or so.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I think that something happened to you, and that something is when this praying mantis type figure said that there was like a purpose, like there's a reasoning for it all, right?
Like it was all part of the plan.
It was all part of the plan. How did that make you feel?
I was like speechless, really. I have so many questions.
Yeah, that would leave a lot of questions for me, because I really feel like there's something. It's kind of like, well, what plan is there? Because
exactly, what plan?
Yeah, because currently the way that we're going right now is very Twilight Zone-ish. Like the world is in this weird upside down dimension that nothing makes sense at all. I mean, we just went through COVID. There's all these wars that are happening. There's all these, there's this underlying feeling of like upcoming famine, drought, upcoming, just catastrophic things where people are going to change dramatically.
And I could also touch on that with the sense of, if you realize a lot more things are becoming more polarized, more left versus right versus down, right versus down, a lot of black versus white. It's all becoming a lot of duality within the universe. Yeah. It's all coming to light.
It's interesting that you say that, because the truth is we live in a dualistic reality. I mean, we're taught yes and no, right and wrong, and how that looks. But then a lot of times I've interviewed people who've had near-death experiences that say there is no duality on the other side.
Right.
You leave the duality behind.
This place, this plane.
Exactly. Which makes me wonder what this is. And if we're in something, then that's a different reality. What are these creatures that are coming through and saying that we're part of a plan? At least that's what they told you. But they've said that to other people as well, too, that it's all part of the plan. It's part of what's happening. So it makes me wonder what this big plan is. And you haven't had any experiences since then? You haven't had any...
Oh, yeah. I've had a few experiences, yes.
Oh, okay.
When I started, I've had contact with certain beings before. Within the past year, 2 years, I've started having like firsthand experiences, like first contacts. Like I've met during the meditation. I was physically pulled out of my body by 3 beings who brought me to a place of all white. They were called the Keepers.
Really?
They told me about the meaning of life, what God is, what happens to death. Taught me about universe, time, like dimensions, all kinds of stuff. They gave me ideas for technology. They said they help guide humans to the accessing of knowledge through non-physical realms, and I figured that out after I went down the CE5 rabbit hole with the whole Dr. Stephen Greer stuff, and that opened my mind to so many other things, and that's where I started getting into the projected consciousness, the gateway tapes.
Very interesting.
All kinds of stuff.
Very interesting.
My wife had been visited by a tall, white-skinned being that had like an egg-shaped head. This was back in Chicago. And then we moved to Washington State, and then like the first night here, we were visited by these small, like 3-4 foot tall, like cloaked beings that looked invisible, but like you could still see them. It was in like the middle of the night. There were like 4 or 5 or 6, like a big group of them coming down off the hill, like running around the yard. It seemed very playful. And then I remember I was live streaming it to my Discord group, and I remember my wife was sitting right next to me. We were watching this, and this one of them came running right up to the window, and it scared me, and it knocked me off my balance. Like I fell back, and when I went back up to grab my phone to record it, my hand started just my hand from the wrist up started cramping like I've never had it cramped before, and it hurt, absolutely hurt. And it was very scary, scary.
Okay, so your wife has been involved.
Yes.
What does she think about all this? Was it something that you introduced to her through your...
She's all... I guess I would say yeah, but she's always kind of believed, but not to the extent or had experiences like I've had.
Okay.
She's been there for a couple of them, yes.
Okay. And is she then... Has this changed her? Is she saying now all these experiences are happening, so something... There must be a connection to all of this then. Is she starting to kind of feel that way and try to...
She has more questions about it. She's, I guess, more so on the fence still.
Okay.
She doesn't know what to think about it.
So tell me more about these entities then. So you said that you were approached... So when you were in Chicago...
So my wife and I, we were both doing the meditations, and she had her own experience with them as well. And they showed her this blue doorway that had a bunch of weird symbols on it. And she asked them what are their names? And then they said they gave her the letter H, like a letter H. She didn't know what that meant. And then with my experience, it was they opened a white hole, and three of them, they were staring at me, and I saw them with both physically and non-physically. I don't know how to explain. It was an overlap,
right,
of 2 different things. It was very weird, but I thought I want to go in there, and as soon as I thought that, I could feel their hands literally reach out and grab me.
Really?
I could physically feel their arms grab me, and they pulled me out of my physical body, and they pulled me through this white place, and they said they were 5th dimensional. I had no concept of time. There was no floor, wall, ceiling. Everything was just infinite white. And it was just very warm, very loving. I felt very accepted to be there.
There's so much to this. And so your story is so important because you're experiencing it. I've experienced it. There's other people out there who are going through the same thing right now. We're all part of something.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to know what it is.
Right. Yeah. I feel like I don't like calling them grays. I don't know why.
Mm-hmm. They don't like that, right? Did you know that?
I've heard that.
Yeah.
I've heard that. Yeah.
So just real quick before you start, there was a guy that I worked with who worked at Area 51. That's what he claimed. He was a radar specialist, and he saw the grays, what we call the grays, okay? And he said they're not gray skin. They're actually normal skin. The reason why they look gray is because when they come in at night, we all look gray. Our vision is black and white. Our night vision is, as humans. And so when there's less light being illuminated, that's what they look like. But he said they hate that. They hate it, being called that.
Wow.
Isn't that weird? I'm just like, that is unbelievable. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's fascinating. Yeah, do you know what they like being called? No,
and he didn't tell me what they like being called. As a matter of fact, he said that it was, so they have normal skin like us. Some are a little bit tanner than others, but it's like a whiter skin. And
they seem very like cashew.
Yeah.
Skinned.
Yeah. And he said that when he worked at Area 51, they would go out to the Nevada test site. So all around they had these different radar stations, and his job was to work on each one. And he said that there was like a program that he had to re-upload. And so he'd have to re-upload this to one radar station. Then he'd have to go to the next one. And it took him weeks, if not months, to go through the whole area. And then he'd have to start over again. And that was his only job. And he said that a couple times he would be out there working, and the camo dudes is what they call them. They had the camouflage suits. They were driving the white Jeeps, and they came out to where he was at, and they would bring the grays. And so what they would do is the Jeeps would have tinted windows in the back because they have a hard time with light. And then they would bring them out, and they had flight suits that they cut at the kneecaps, okay? And so the grays were wearing flight suits. And he said they would come out and just stare at him. So he never talked to them, but he said that they would stare at him as he would work out in the desert. And I said, what did you do when they would stare at you? And he said, well, I'd just wave at them. I'd just say, hey, how's it going? Like, what do you mean? He's like, he said they're just like people. They're no different just because they look different. But they were in control. They were in charge. And so they would come out to see if he was doing his job correctly, if things were working right.
That's interesting.
I asked him, I said, did you ever feel like you would be abducted? And he said no. He said just because their technology was more advanced, he said they're just like us. They're not, there's nothing that was like evil about them. He said that they just, they were more like...
the things I left out from the experience is during the time there was a point where it was almost like channeling. And the little beings were saying, like, we're just like you. We laugh, we live, we love. Like, we do everything you guys do.
Interesting. Yeah, because that's how he was bringing this up, was that they were no different. But they were just in charge. And I think that's the key thing, is that none of the people who worked there, he said, were afraid of them. And they just accepted the fact that there were other creatures out there, and they knew of the craft. They knew how it flew, how it operated. He said that he saw one that was gold color. He said he saw one that was like the sport model that Bob Lazar talks about. He said that there were... Yeah, he said that there were big ones, little ones. There was all different types. And he said at one time he was given access to one of the craft, and they wanted him to go in it, and there's a radar system in the craft, and they wanted him to look at it. and see if there was any way that they could replicate it. And so he did. And when he went in there, I said, well, what was their radar like compared to ours? And he said they could pick out any planet and they could zoom in to the surface of the planet from any star. So from any star, any location that they were at, they could just pick it out on their map and they could zoom into it and see it live. So it's almost like having a satellite that could just zoom in thousands of light years away. He said it was the most fascinating technology that he's ever seen. And he said there's no way that we could duplicate it at all with what we have. Wow. So he just said it's bizarre and it's definitely different, but he had no problem with it. And you know what else is weird is the actual UFO sighting that I've ever had in my life was with him, because we were working at it was a classified facility, and it was the day after 9/11, and we were in Colorado. So where I'm at now, we were right on the foothills near Lockheed Martin. And so it was 9/12/21, and all flights were grounded. George Bush said no more flying, right, for 3 days, 72 hours or something like that. Everything was grounded, even military aircraft. That's what's so important about it. And so I'm out doing a patrol, and there, where this place was, because it was a classified facility, there was nothing there, like nothing. I was doing a patrol for what? It just housed government servers. That's all. It was like a co-location facility. We know that there's a ton of those now, but back then there wasn't. And so the government had like 80% of their servers at this location. Yahoo had some, IBM had some, and it took up a big chunk of the internet. And so if it blew up or went down, all the internet would go down, essentially. So I was out, and it was 11 o'clock at night, and there's a reservoir that's right outside of it. And I looked out, and there was these two white lights, and they started coming towards me across the reservoir. And I was like, oh, that's weird. I don't hear like a noise, and they're just white. So there's no indication of that they're aircraft, and nothing's supposed to be in the air. I ran in and I grabbed this guy. Now, this guy was old at the time, okay? So I grabbed him. I'm pulling him out. I'm like, hey, what are those? He said, well, that's two Apaches flying in tandem. And I said, but I don't hear any noise. There's no noise. And so just then, as I said that, the front of the nose lifted up, and it was a black triangular craft, and it went right over us. And so the lights were those points that were right underneath, and it was making this sound that's like if you're in an office building and you hear like the air conditioning running, and there's like a hissing sound, right? Mm-hmm. That's what it sounded like almost like a electrostatic something.
Yeah.
And it floated right above us, and I'm shaking this guy. I'm like, oh my God, do you see that? I'm shaking this old man, and it hovered above us, and then it started taking off to the city. And as soon as it got to the city, the lights went out. I mean, it was like 3 white lights in a triangle pattern, and then as soon as it got to where there was any kind of city, it was gone. And where it came from on the other side of the reservoir was Lockheed Martin. And right now they've bought up all that land. So all that land it's not owned by Lockheed Martin, but they bought it up and they made it into like commercial real estate. They made it into homes. So now I go back there, 20 some years later, and it doesn't even look like it did when I worked out there. I mean, it doesn't look anything like that. And I try to tell like my wife and my kids, I'm like, yeah, this is where I had my UFO encounter. They're like, how come nobody else saw it? I'm like, because nobody else was out here. It was just one building. That was it, in the middle of nowhere. But that made me change my view on a lot of things. And I got to say that like our journey, man, that's what makes us, is our journey in this life.
100%.
It sounds like you went through a lot in your journey.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So do you think that you said that there were other races that communicated with you?
Yeah, I've communicated with a family of humanoid-looking beings that looked very very slender, but had very large. I wouldn't say like blocky head, but like they were very squarish and very like angular with their bone structure. And their like facial features were like more scrunched up. Like their eyes were like closer together. The nose was closer up. The mouth was like, it was very scrunched, very small. But like their heads were like about our size, like maybe a little bit bigger. And it was just like a family. Like there was a male, female, two kids. They showed me their planet. Like it was all like through like a projected like consciousness. Like we like made a link. Like but like they were in like some distant galaxy. Like the whole premise was like me showing like our star system, our planet, where I was located, like what landmass, near what body of water, near what city, and then like I projected that out, and then like I got that in return, and that's where we made the link. And then I met this family. We exchanged memories. We shared memories of our families, like what we've done, what our places are like. It was very cordial and very like. It was awesome. It was very. It was a very beautiful experience.
Yeah.
We didn't like share like information. We weren't like talking like politics, technology. We were just sharing about ourselves.
So do you tend to think that have you heard of Whitley Strieber?
Yeah.
So do you think that his idea of extraterrestrials being more of like a kind, understanding, spiritual race, do you think that that is more what you've experienced, or do you think that there's something out there that could also be a negative as well too?
I mean, I've heard both sides of the story. I've met people who have had negative experiences, and I think a lot of them out there do mean well, but like even with humanity, there's good people and there's bad people. I definitely think there are some out there with their own agendas, but like from the majority of my own experiences, I've never had like a negative, harmful experience. I've always been positive and through spiritual means.
Yeah, that's good.
I mean, the one from like my abduction, like I've never got the sense where they harmed me. It was just very scary. It's very very bone chilling because the whole experience, like I was just hyperventilating. I was scared out of my mind.
There is there's a book, and I think that it's like Interview with an Alien or Alien Interview or something, and it's by a woman who was part of the Roswell incident, and she wrote about being a nurse at the base and working on one of the extraterrestrials from the craft. Have you heard of that one?
I think I know what you're talking about, yeah.
And she had communication with it through telepathy. She wrote everything down in a journal, and essentially this creature was telling her that there's no such thing as death, essentially. You know, our consciousness moves on, and that, you know, the way that we view death as humans is, I don't know, it's very, I don't want to say childish, but it's almost like we're not mature enough to understand yet that we just we continue on after this.
Right. That's what I'm told as well.
Yeah, so I was going to say, so what, have you had that type of communication then?
Yes.
Okay.
So when I said earlier when I met the keepers, they told me about God, death, what happens after physical death, and like time, all that stuff. They told me that death is just it's just energy moving on. We all return to the same source consciousness, and we all offload the lessons that we learn. It's not real. It's not this, like our body is just a vessel. Right.
Which is interesting because that plays into a lot of religions, because religions always talk about the body being a vessel. I think the only thing that doesn't is science, and I think that's where we get a lot of this confusion, because science opens up this conundrum of we need to have sources, data, we need things to be repeatable, if that makes sense. You know, we need it to have a certain flow, and religion,
it's more repeatable than people design.
Yeah, but religion can't check off those boxes, and so people become so constrained in this dualistic reality where it's like, well, I feel like there's life after that death. You know, I feel like there's a God. I feel like there's something, but then science is telling me that everything is, you know, almost like a fluke in a way. You know, they make it sound like Earth and everything about it, all the synchronicities are just coincidences. They're not synchronicities. There's no purpose behind them. They also make it seem like, there's no true meaning behind it. It's just we are who we are. And they used to make it sound like we're one of a kind.
Mm-hmm.
But it's almost like it's done like that on purpose. Does that make sense? Like it's almost done as a hypnotic way of pulling certain people one way. And then others who aren't suggestible, they go a different way with it.
I can see that, yeah.
Do you think that, because you mentioned you were atheist at one time, do you think when you were going down that path, it was something that was pulling you away from like a purpose and a plan that somebody else had for you? Because remember, you had that experience with the...
I guess that does kind of resonate, because as a kid, I would always see UFOs. Like I would always see, like I lived on like the side of a hill, so I was able to look out on the valley of the city.
Really?
And the river runs right through the middle of the city, and right along the river, there's a large forest. So during cloudy nights, when I always had trouble sleeping as a kid, I still have trouble sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
I would stay up late at night, and I would look out the window, and I would just watch the stars, watch the landscape, just like watch this, like the lights of the cars go by, just watch the city.
Right.
And every so often, like during rainy nights, I would see these red balls of light drop through the cloud line and just like go right into the forest and just disappear.
Really?
And I would see a couple of them at a time. They would just fall. They wouldn't like float down. They would like deliberate, same speed the entire time, like deliberate. And they would go into the middle of the forest. So I'd always see that. And then a few years ago, I was also staying back in the same place since I moved back. I had taken a random picture through Snapchat, just like because I was just gonna draw some like funny stuff on the screen. But I took a picture outside the window, and I look closely, and I see these two objects. There was one, what I know now, they look like Tic Tacs.
Yeah. Okay.
I could show you the picture too. And I was like, whoa, what the hell is that? So the next day I go and show my my coworker, because he's all into aliens and UFOs and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I showed him what I took, and his face just like went like, he was just taken back, because the previous evening that I took that picture,
mm-hmm.
he was at Costco and he saw the exact same thing up in the sky, in the same pattern, the same positioning, but it was like they were lit up.
Really?
They were lit up. And I did some investigative research, and I looked at like how I was facing it versus how he was facing it.
Mm-hmm.
I was on the south side looking north, and he was on the west side looking east. And like the positioning of the objects, they matched. They were the exact same objects sitting there in the sky for over 24 hours.
Wow, really? Wow, I gotta say, I mean, everything that you've said has really resonated with me and really been. I mean, all of your experiences have just been amazing. I really do appreciate, you coming on and sharing all of this with us. I know there's a lot more. Do you have anything? Are you sharing your stuff online at all with anybody? I know you do on Reddit, but do you have anything like on YouTube or anything like that?
No, I don't have like YouTube videos or anything like that.
Okay. Yeah, because it'd be nice if people are interested on how to even get in touch with you, to talk about some of your experiences, to kind of let them know. Is that okay? I mean, what would be a good way for us to do that?
I mean, I'm on Twitter, Antisocial Guru. You can also find me on Reddit. Okay.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, let's let people know, because I know so many people are going to have questions on it, and they'll probably want to ask you and kind of see a little bit more about what you've experienced. But I gotta say, man, everything resonated with me, and I really appreciate you coming on and talking with us.
Well, I appreciate you having me on to talk about it.
Yeah.
It feels good to talk about.
I want to thank you for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it. We talk about a lot of crazy stuff here, so if you want to hear more, just like and subscribe to the channel. It'd really help us out a lot. And plus, if you have a crazy story, whether it be an alien abduction, near-death experience, or something of the paranormal, or a glitch in the matrix, please let us know. Share it in the comments. We'd love to have you on the show.